You're listening to Fire Ecology Chats, a podcast series by the Association for Fire Ecology.
Hey everybody, my name is Bob Keane. I'm the editor-in-chief of the internationally renowned journal Fire Ecology, and today we have a very, very important guest talking about a really important paper that has just recently been published in Fire Ecology. Erica Smithwick, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about you?
Hi, thanks for having me. Yes, my name is Erica Smithwick. I am a faculty member in the Geography Department at Penn State University. I also direct the Earth and Environmental Systems Institute and our new climate consortium.
Thank you, Erica, for coming on today and giving us your time and telling us about this wonderful paper. The paper we're going to be talking about today is Barriers and Opportunities for Implementing Prescribed Fire, Lessons from Managers in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. Erica, could you tell us a little about this paper?
Happy to do so. This is a paper of love. We've been working on it for many years now. The goal was to really get into the minds of managers in the Mid-Atlantic region. For us, prescribed fire is a relatively new strategy in some parts of our region, and in other parts of the region, it's fairly well established. And this really presents an opportunity for us to understand how we can use this fire more comprehensively, because we know prescribed burning is beneficial to managers across the nation, but the challenges are very, very local and very regional. Because managers are at the front line of those challenges, they have a lot of experience. We really wanted to understand that at a landscape level and think about how we could take that local knowledge that managers have and try to think about what that meant for putting more fire back on the land safely in the Mid-Atlantic region. We found that these barriers and the opportunities that managers face are hierarchical, multi-level, right? They happen at the level of the individual manager or the individual prescribed fire personnel, but they also are happening at the community level as those managers are interfacing with the community, and they're happening at the landscape level when these managers are working with other agencies and try to coordinate that management strategy across what are actually quite complex landscapes in the Mid-Atlantic region. And so we found that to be really, really interesting and something people ought to know about, that we need to think about what managers are worrying about in the day-to-day, as well as how we're preparing them and preparing the management community so that those managers are prepared to put this out on the landscape safely and effectively.
There is nothing more important about this paper in this time with the prescribed burning legislation that's being proposed in Washington right now. This paper is a really good background with that. And yes, I couldn't believe that it is hierarchical. It's not like managers face very simple issues. They're hierarchical and very complex. So why are these results that you just told us important for these managers? What are they going to use this for?
What we hope that they use it for on the day-to-day is to really start talking with each other on one level, right? And they do, frankly. When we were in those rooms, they know the common challenges that they face. And I think they need more and more opportunities to come together to share those challenges and how they want to succeed. Because the number one opportunity that we found was that they want to coordinate at the landscape level. They want to work together, and yet they're constrained perhaps by resources, capacity, of course, but also by the policies and the goals and the objectives of each agency or land management unit. So, for example, in our region, we have a lot of use of prescribed fire that's not just for wildfire risk, obviously, because we're in most places in the Mid-Atlantic. We'll talk about New Jersey as an exception, but in some places in Pennsylvania, we've had mesification for a long time. So wildfire risk isn't really on the forefront of folks' minds, but what is on the forefront of their minds is habitat management, getting fire-adapted species back on the landscape to support game hunting and game species habitat. And so we're burning for a lot of different kinds of reasons, and that can really have implications on what the agency's objectives are. And so getting managers to talk with each other is really important. The second thing that's really, really influential, I think, about this paper is that it affects how we approach national strategy around prescribed fire. It's not going to play out the same way in every region. And in Region 9, for example, of the Forest Service and where the Mid-Atlantic is mostly, we're talking about a strategy that's going to play out very differently because of those different objectives across agencies, but also because we have a lot more wildland-urban interface here than you might even recognize. We talk about it a lot in the West, as we should, but Pennsylvania has the 5th highest WUI in the nation. We have a lot of communities living in our forests. We also have a lot of infrastructure, right? We're talking about fires in New Jersey that can get across the state in 48 hours. And you can imagine the kind of impact a wildfire might have in New Jersey just in the 48 hours. We don't, in many cases, have those those large federal landscapes that you have in the West. So we need a different framework for thinking about implementing prescribed fire in this region. And that really needs to feed into what happens, with a comprehensive strategy and things we're doing at the national level.
Yeah, so incredibly interesting. Thanks for that. Wonder if you can spend a minute just telling us about your methods.
So this was a very interdisciplinary approach. I've been working a lot, as many geographers do, across the natural and social sciences for many years now. A lot of my work is originally out in the West doing fire ecology, but when you're working in a place that's as complicated as the mid-Atlantic, we realized pretty quickly that this is a human problem as much as anything. So our work was really informed as much by the social and qualitative sciences as it was by traditional fire ecology and the natural sciences. And so we did focus groups. We worked with managers that were coordinated across Maryland, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and got them together in a room from a number of agencies and had a wonderful time interacting with them, and then used traditional qualitative methods to kind of understand, okay, what are they saying? And what we learned through that process, very well vetted and established in the social sciences, is that we could use these quotes to exemplify certain themes. And when we started to unpack those themes, we realized, whoa, these are not just unilateral. They are multi-level, they're hierarchical, and we were able to demonstrate this multi-level outcome.
Thanks for that. It was obvious from reading the paper that this connected to a lot of other work you've got going on. Want to talk about that work?
Yeah, so this work is coming from a project funded by the Joint Fire Sciences Program, where it's one of the last pieces of it. We have one more piece coming out soon, hopefully. But previous to this work, we had also done interviews with users. So people who are using these landscapes, recreational users, we called them. So we did something called trail intercept surveys. And that work was really to understand how communities would be accepting or not of these kinds of prescribed fire practices. And that is particularly of importance to Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania hasn't had a prescribed burning plan until 2009. So it's really new. The managers came to us initially and said, hey, we don't know if the community is going to be accepting of putting fire on the landscape. They're kind of worried. And we're like, well, we can help. We can go out there and read the pulse of people as they're using this landscape. Now, the work may be somewhat biased in the sense that we're already talking to people that are already in the woods. So it's not a comprehensive household survey or anything like that. But what we did find is that those recreational users, at least, were accepting for the most part of burning. And that was really useful information to bring back to our managers. We also saw that there are some differences across states in terms of what they were worried about or what they were most excited about in terms of the management of these forests through fire. It turns out that, fun fact, one common thing that everybody could get on board with was ticks. And so if fires could reduce ticks, everybody was really on board. And the science is still out on that. I actually have another paper that we're working on with a graduate student about the influence of prescribed burning in the mid-Atlantic on ticks. I guess I can foreshadow the results show some short-term positive influence there. We just don't know much about the long-term influence. But if managers can start telling that story, that would be a really good way to engage communities about this issue that otherwise can get a little complex. But if you can tell them that there's going to be a benefit around ticks, that seems to be something that everybody can get on board with. We did one other study as well on monitoring the effectiveness of prescribed burning in this region, because again, in Pennsylvania, it's a new practice. So is it even going to be effective? We had a study where we went out and actually measured that. And sure enough, it looks like it's meeting a number of our objectives in terms of getting oak and hickory and other fire adapted species back on the landscape. Longer term studies, of course, are going to be needed, but that's really exciting. And then the third pillar there was doing some modeling using FVS. So we tried to model the anticipated effects of fire return intervals over longer periods of time, since we haven't had that monitoring runway yet. And that work has showed that, yeah, if we burn at the intervals that managers would like to, which can be maybe a 10-year interval here in Pennsylvania, that you're going to meet those objectives. However, there may be trade-offs. So what's kind of cool is that if you're burning at a much higher frequency, maybe to manage your pitch pine landscapes, you might get some declines in your carbon storage. So depending on what you're managing for, are you managing for fire adapted habitat or are you managing for carbon, managers would have to weigh those objectives. And of course, that goes back to the paper we're talking about now, which is saying that across agencies might have different objectives and, they need to coordinate among those objectives when doing their planning.
Speaking of those longer term things, are there any next steps to this paper that you want to take on?
Yeah, well, this has got me pretty fired up, excuse the pun, about understanding how we're managing fire in this region moving forward. I also am wearing other hats and am really interested more and more in the climate change topic and fire. I've studied that in the West already. We know that climate's not the only factor, but we really haven't thought about climate and fire in the East. But some recent papers have indicated that, especially in shoulder seasons, we might be looking at, yes, more flooding and wetter overall, which might build up fuels, but we also might get more droughts. Everything about the climate models tell us variability is what we should be planning for. So what does that mean for the East? Do we have the right models? Do we have the right data streams to help us understand what that might mean in the future? We're starting to look into that. And the key here is that we're not expecting the East, and I hope it doesn't turn into the stories from the West right now. We're not expecting that. It's probably going to be different. It might mean more heterogeneity. It might mean more landscapes being fire prone and then other landscapes sort of settling in and locking in to be fire resistant. And so what does that mean for the future? But the key is we don't know. We don't have the right fire weather indices that have been tested here. We don't have the data sets to kind of validate some of those models. And so it's a real unknown. So we're interested in moving in that direction.
Such an exciting paper. Would you like to recognize any funding agencies or other people that were involved with this project?
Yeah, I really want to acknowledge the Joint Fire Sciences Program for funding this work. It was really, really helpful to us and allowed us the opportunity to work in partnership with managers. And I also want to acknowledge the support of the North Atlantic Fire Science Exchange, which really helped us, again, make some of those connections with the managers. And then, of course, within our region, the Bureau of Forestry in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the Central Appalachian Fire Learning Network, and the Fire Service in New Jersey. All of these were partners in our work, and we couldn't have done it without them.
Again, thank you so much, Erica, for coming on and telling us about this paper. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I hope people get a chance to read it. It was a labor of love, but we're really glad it's out there now.
And those of you who want to read it, guess what? It's available for free at our website in Fire Ecology. It was just published by Springer. Go ahead, download it now, and we'll see you all at the next Fire Ecology Chat.